On today's episode of Locked On Wild, after the Wild won a couple of games that they should, the biggest test so far awaits them this week.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day. And we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we recap a couple of wins for the Wild last week, setting up a big test on the East Coast. And we'll talk about that, as well as a rough start to the Iowa Wild season for Jesper Wallstedt. Those numbers are not great, but we'll talk about that. We'll talk about some of the good things that we've seen for the Minnesota Wild so far this season. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild since 2021 and a credentialed media member, joined as always by Alex Micheletti here for our Monday episode. And it is a Victory Micheletti Monday. Minnesota Wilds were the only team that answered the bell this weekend in Minnesota sports. Vikings, the Minnesota Lynx, don't even get me started on that one. But the Minnesota Wild did pick up a win against Columbus 3-1. And so, Alex, after a couple of overtime losses back-to-back to Seattle, a game in which the Wilds led early and kind of let that one slip, battled hard against Winnipeg and just came up a little bit short in that one. They beat St. Louis. They beat Columbus. And through 5 games, the Minnesota Wild have not trailed for a second. And so winning a lot of the games that we'd expect that they would, keeping things close against the Winnipeg Jets. And so through 5 games, I think the team has done better than I expected that they would, at least early on.
Yeah, I was not expecting this, especially the goaltending. Credit to Filip Gustavsson. He's been the biggest key so far, I think, in these first slate of games that they've had. Obviously, we know 97, but I think it's the goaltending for sure because he's stolen a couple of games.
Yeah, and you look at the stats, and Filip Gustavsson is currently 6th in the NHL with a 1.49 goals against average. His save percentage has him 6th as well at .950. Hasn't been able to get a shutout yet. Had a couple of instances against both the Blues and the Blue Jackets in which they were able to spoil things late. But I guess a little bit of a switch from what we saw last year and even the year before that is it seemed like the goalies for the Wild were giving up some of those goals that you're like, geez, your goalie should really have that one. Seemed like those are coming in like the first period. And so I guess if I had to pick, I would rather that those types of goals come in the third than the first. And in all of the situations so far, with the exception of the start by Marc-Andre Fleury against the Kraken, with all the goals given up so far, they've come in situations in which the game has pretty much been out of reach.
Yeah, 100%. And, the game, like you said, the games have already been decided for the most part. And heck, how about Gus with the goalie goal too? Just power play too. Just fitting the Wild, the content that they provide. It's just perfect.
It just never ends, and it just never ceases to entertain. And you look at the stats as well, and Kirill obviously listened to the episode that I did on Friday because he was just another Kirill game against the Blue Jackets where he had a goal and an assist played a ton of minutes. And I know you look at a 3-1 score and you think, oh boy, it would have been nice. Would have been nice to maybe win that one by a little more, considering the players that were out for the Blue Jackets and the fact that the Columbus goalie, quite frankly, I had a chance to watch a little bit of the game, and Anthony LaPanta hit it right on the head in the broadcast, saying that their goalie was like a fish out of water, just not having success tracking the puck. But at the end of the day, I think the thing that is comforting is that it just never felt like a game that was in question.
No.
And against teams like that, even if you don't put up 5, 6, 7 goals, the fact that there was never a question as to the outcome, I think that's the big takeaway. And the Blues game was tight, but the Wild did a good job of just continuing to add goals to put that one away. And so, we know that we want to see this team have a little more talent, but at the end of the day, winning games and putting games out of reach, that's all it comes down to.
Yeah, another encouraging thing that I've noticed too early, and we talked about this in the offseason, is Matt Zuccarello. He's shooting the puck more, which is really great to see. I mean, he's off to a good start in the goal scoring department, and he's not only just being a disher, but he's shooting the puck, and that adds an element that the Wild were really missing last season. So I hope he continues to do that as well.
Yeah, you've got so far through 5 games, you have 5 different players with multiple goals, including Kirill, Matt Boldy, Marco Rossi, who scored against the Blue Jackets.
Great goal.
Matt Zuccarello, and also Ryan Hartman, who was not able to play against Columbus. But something else that we've seen that kind of is a difference from last year is that the Wild have a deeper lineup that is able to more absorb these types of losses. Hartman out of the lineup, Liam Ogren slots in, and he looked good in the minutes that he had out there on the ice. But as long as the top 2 lines kind of carry the bill, those are going to be the types of losses in the lineup that you can absorb and not miss much of a beat.
No, 100%. And it's, thank goodness they have Husandinov and Ogren ready to go. That was at the end of last season. That was so valuable for them to get some ice time and know what it takes to play in the NHL. And so yeah, good for those guys. And now it's paying off, and you don't have to worry about them playing. So
I guess the frustrating thing is that we are in the year 2024 and nobody in the NHL knows what goaltender interference is.
No, it's like the NFL catch rule. It's just and you can even have things be reviewed and they can still get it wrong. It's
that was about the point of the game that I was watching, and Tarasov. So the question is that there was a Columbus player pushed into Tarasov in the crease, but the point that was brought up on the broadcast was that he had more than enough time to get himself ready, like recollect himself.
6'5".
Yeah, he barely moved for one. He had more than enough time to collect himself. And then after the initial shot came, he curled up in the fetal position in the front of the crease.
Motion.
I don't know if he just thought that the puck went out of play or what the deal was, because it was very clearly still a live puck, and he just just sat there.
So the NHL ref, it's like a spin the wheel, kind of like player safety. The Blues Wild game where Gus didn't have the puck and it was clearly a live puck, and Kyrou didn't get that goal. Yeah, just the refs. It's seriously you don't know what's gonna happen game to game.
Far and away the thing that I'm most surprised about, and I hope I'm not jinxing this by talking about it, is that the Minnesota Wild through 5 games are 3rd fewest in terms of penalty minutes so far. The only teams that have fewer penalties are the New York Islanders, who have 20 penalty minutes in 5 games, and the Winnipeg Jets, who have 14 penalty minutes through 4 games, but then they won today 6-3. Let's see what they got for. Maybe they had like 90 penalty minutes in this one. No, they did not. They got called for 2 penalties for a total of 4 penalty minutes. But the point still stands, and the fact that the Wild have not paraded to the penalty box like they did last year, I think is a big reason as to why they've had 8 of 10 points so far. Power play has been doing a really good job. They're tied for 4th at 31.3%. Penalty kills at 75%, but again, as I just said, they have hardly had to use it a ton. And I think a lot of the success for the penalty kill is going to key on being able to win face-offs to prevent the other team from getting set up and being able to really work their magic.
Yeah, you've nailed it, and it's allowed them not to overdo it with some players. I know Kirill's playing heavy minutes, but it's keeping a lot of players' minutes at a good level, not overdoing it, and so that's going to be key, especially once they start playing some better teams like this upcoming week.
Yeah.
So they got some superstars that they're going to be playing. So I mean, I know we're going to talk about it, but
so I'll categorize it as a pleasant surprise to the start of the season, but this is going to be a big test this week, including a noon game on Saturday. We'll talk about that. That is pure chaos by the NHL schedule makers with college football season in full swing. We'll talk about that game as well as the 2 Florida games. But first, not a great start to the Iowa portion of his schedule for Jesper Wallstedt. And so we'll talk that out a little bit, as well as kind of what the plan is for Jared Spurgeon. We'll talk about all that as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Indeed. We are driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Plus, listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Reminder, tonight, join us for our latest edition of Locked On Wild Live. Denny's got a very interesting discussion topic for tonight, talking about a tweak that he saw the Minnesota Wild make in regards to their passing. I'm very intrigued, and you should be as well. So join us tonight, 8 p.m., right here on YouTube. And we are working on some crossovers again. I know everybody loves the crossover episodes. Just talked to Armando Velez of Locked On Florida Panthers this weekend. We got one ironed out for Tuesday. So be on the lookout for that, to talk a little bit about the Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers and their defense of their Stanley Cup trophy, and a series between these two teams that has frankly been just bizarre over the last few years. The Wild had a game last year in which I think they scored 4 or 5 power play goals against the Panthers. Figure that out. So we'll talk about all that as we get you some intel before Tuesday's game against the Panthers. But before we talk about the next week's schedule, Alex, Jesper Wallstedt had a bit of a rough go in his most recent game, which came against the Barracuda, the farm team for the San Jose Sharks. And it was that was on the heels of another rough outing against those same Barracuda, in which I think all told in the last 5 periods of hockey, I think Jesper has given up something like 12 goals in that span. And his numbers on the season, 0-2, a 7.2 goals against average, 821 save percentage, 55 saves and 67 save opportunities. And I don't know, I saw on Twitter some suggestion that it may have been the defense in front of him that was just not helping him out really at all. Kind of looks like a guy that really doesn't know where he fits at the current moment in this organization. And so he's getting starts in Iowa, but you've also got a guy in Iowa and Samuel Levi that you want to get a really good look at this entire season. Filip Gustavsson is lights out at the NHL level, to the point that I'm now convinced that we are going to see Filip Gustavsson start all 3 games this week. Like, at this point, honestly, I can't really fault the team for continuing to give him starts for how good he's been. But like, you're going to need within the next couple of weeks, you're going to need to have somebody else start a game,
right?
Because you got a back-to-back against San Jose and Anaheim. And so I guess at this point, it kind of seems like the 3 goalie rotation plan has already been put in the shredder. I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
Well, this team, they can't stay 100% healthy. So that, it throws out whatever plans that they thought right away. There's already injuries to multiple players at key spots. So you never know with this team what they're going to do. And of course, they're going to have to do cap gymnastics all season. So good luck to Bill and crew in the front office with that. It's just mind-boggling.
And then you have, like, you got Ryan Hartman, who missed the Blue Jackets game. Before that, you had Marcus Johansson, Joel Eriksson-Ek. Now, Joel Eriksson-Ek was an interesting case because I don't think anybody was ever seriously worried about, like, oh, this might be more than just a broken nose.
Yeah.
It just was the weird thing where, and I didn't even know this was a thing until it was pointed out in our Discord server, that the altitude, when you have like a break, the altitude in flights can really throw a monkey wrench into things.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's just, like Brock Besser, he had blood clots. And so they're really monitoring, when Vancouver has to fly. And it's amazing what can all go into that.
They could have got Eriksson-Ek up to Winnipeg in time for the game on Sunday. Just drive. It's not that far.
Yeah, I don't know what the deal is there. Yeah.
Or just head straight south and go to St. Louis.
Yeah.
I don't know. But hey, I mean, he's back in the lineup. He's got the bubble shield going, and so it's fine. But like we talked about, the plan was to keep Jesper on the line, in the lineup, on the roster for as much of the season as you can. But if you have injuries, which Jared Spurgeon is, I think, the big one that is a factor in this right now. If you have injuries, in order to be able to get somebody up, that roster spot is just, it's too important for this team right now. And so I don't know, at this point, when you have that back-to-back coming up in a couple of weeks, do you go Fleury for one of those 2 games in hopes that he can bounce back? I mean,
those opponents aren't, they're awful teams right now, especially when we joked off air. When is San Jose going to win a game? Because
They look
well,
really
we talked about
bad.
in the group chat too. Is Tyler Toupal, is he regretting signing with San Jose? That one made no sense. Yeah, San Jose's down really bad without Celebrini.
And that back-to-back is 8 games from now. And so how long do you ride Filip Gustavsson as your hot hands?
Well,
Like if
Fleury didn't look great against Seattle. It was not
no,
good. Yeah, I mean there were some softies, and so I mean with the way Gus is playing, I guess he plays until he loses or has a really really bad game.
honestly, I think if you get like let's say when you play Florida, let's say you lose like a 3-2 game and Gus like stands on his head, I think you probably go right back to him.
Yeah, you can't play him against Tampa or Fleury against Tampa. I don't see that going well.
No, he had the game. What was it, last year or the year before, where the Wild were just reeling, and he had that like stood on his head, and people were like, "Yeah, he played out of his mind." And you look at the stats, and he's given up 4 goals, and it's like, yeah, he couldn't have played much better, but
Right.
Filip Gustavsson is right now, and so I just keep going. I keep going as long as he is willing to go, unless it's a back-to-back. Like at this point, the key
thing is him being in shape too. He looks like he's lost a ton of weight.
Well, and did you notice? And I'm going to record the 3 keys for the Columbus game after this. So if I double up on this point, that's my fault. But did you notice that Columbus tried the same play that Jordan Eberle scored against Fleury and against the Wild, and Filip Gustavsson was ready for it?
He must have seen that on film.
He knew the guy was there, and so he just stuck his pad down and blocked that wall off. And that's the kind of stuff, those are the kinds of things that a number 1 goalie does.
Yeah.
And when I saw that, I just having had a chance to follow the team all season so far, I got pumped up because I'm like, Columbus saw that happen to the Wild, and they said, okay, let's see if this works. And Gustafsson said, no, it's not going to.
It can be.
But yeah, it's been a rough start. The Iowa Wild, I don't believe they're 0-3 on the season so far. They've given up 18 goals in the 3 games so far. How many have they scored? Oh, that was a bad choice. They've scored 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So rocky start for the Iowa Wild, but we'll talk more about the Iowa Wilds as the season unfolds. It's hard this early to really form opinions on things until you get a good handful of games under your belt. But shout out to Hunter Height. Hat trick to turn that into a 7-3 loss.
when he got the hat trick, I thought of the meme that always goes around, the Chris Paul making a 3.
Yeah, he sinks a 3 to cut it to a 44-point deficit. That's good. Stick taps though, Hunter Height. We'll see if we can't maybe chat with him as the season unfolds. But tough week coming up for the Wild, a measuring stick week for the Minnesota Wild, including a game that is going to force me to have college football on one screen and the Minnesota Wild on the other. We'll talk about all that as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wilds after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Boy, if you live bet the Pittsburgh Steelers in the second half of the Sunday Night Football game against the New York Jets, you had a good night because that game was all Jets early on, and the Pittsburgh Steelers just ran away and hid while Aaron Rodgers questioned all of his decisions over the last few weeks on the sidelines. So, again, FanDuel would have made that a reality where you could have scooped up some nice winnings by live betting that second half. And you will get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Doesn't have to be a winner. It can be any $5 bet. So you could take the Minnesota Wild against the Florida Panthers, and if Florida wins, you still get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So head to FanDuel.com right now to take advantage of this great deal. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to check out Locked On NHL for your second listen so that you can hear more about the hot starts to the NHL season. And something you may hear on Tuesday's edition of Locked On NHL is Winnipeg Jets fans chanting, "Where's Rutger?" to the Pittsburgh Penguins as those two were squaring off on Sunday. Winnipeg fully in their bag at this point in the season, and honestly is the last unbeaten. Kind of hard to blame them, but we'll talk more about the Winnipeg Jets. Colorado Avalanche maybe pulling themselves out of whatever they were in to start the season. Turns out when your goalies don't give up 6 goals a night, it helps. But we'll talk about all that on the Western Conference Tuesday edition of Locked On NHL. Make sure to join us then. All right, Alex, a 2-0-1 week for the Minnesota Wild last week. Well, technically 2-0 since the Winnipeg game happened before we started recording. And 3 games on the schedule for the Wild this week. At Florida on Tuesday, a 5:30 start for that game. So that must be the first of a doubleheader.
Yeah, it has to
somebody
be
on the West Coast.
All right.
Then the Wild take on the Tampa Bay Lightning on Thursday, 6 p.m. start. I love East Coast starts. 6 p.m. Awesome.
Yeah.
And then on Saturday, the Wild play at Philadelphia at noon.
I don't know what they were thinking. They're not. You want to compete against college football, especially in that area of the East Coast. Yeah. I can't wait to see what the crowd's going to be like for that.
It's going to be. It's going to be probably a sparse crowd because Philadelphia is pretty up and down. They're 1-3-1, 8th in the Metropolitan. They have lost 4 straight games after beating I had it right the first time. They beat the Canucks 3-2 to start the season, and they have then lost to the Flames 6-3, the Oilers 4-3, and the Kraken 6-4. Then they got shut out by the Canucks 3-0, and now they take on the Washington Capitals here on Tuesday. So I don't know. Philly is a team that you definitely should beat. Honestly, I think if I'm in if I'm going with the Wild or a playoff team mode, I feel like you have to find a way to get 2 points between Tuesday and Thursday. Whatever combination that takes, if that's overtime games in both, if that's a win outright in one of those games, I feel like if you can get 2 points between at Florida and at Tampa Bay, I would be really impressed with that.
Oh, home run! Defending champ, and then Tampa's been obviously the class of the East for a long time, and it's going to be tough. Kucherov is playing at a heart level already. It's just amazing. what they have with Gensel now too, and Vasilevsky is still elite in that. So yeah, if you can push it to overtime, that's a win.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's the thing that playoff teams do.
Yes.
Is when they go into these tough road environments, they find a way to at least get the game to OT based off of the current points system. Now, former Minnesota Wild forward Mitchell Chaffee made the opening night roster for the Tampa Bay Lightning. He has a goal and an assist through 4 games, but it's a lot of the usual suspects. Nikita Kucherov has 7 of the total 16 goals for the Lightning so far. Jake Gensel has 5 points in 4 games. Braden Points, Wild will always be linked to him forever.
PDO, thank you. Those are names that will just you can right off the top of your head. That's you'll always remember.
Yeah, they're just never going to forget.
And them getting Ryan McDonagh back. That was maybe that's what's destroying Nashville is not having Ryan McDonagh.
I mean, we certainly can't dismiss it, but Vasilevsky has started every game so far. 3-1, 1.67 goals against average, a .901 save percentage. And you look at the Panthers too. Sam Reinhart, 12 points in 7 games. Anton Lundell, 8 points, 4 goals in 7 games. Sam Bennett has 4 goals in 7 games. From the sounds of it, Matthew Tkachuk will be back for this game. Of course.
Know what illness he had, some Oregon Trail disease that out for who God knows what happened. But and
diphtheria.
Then no that's a team that has just unbelievable depth too. It's crazy what Bill Zito's done.
And Minnesota's own Nate Schmidt,
yes,
on the roster, and back-end defenseman for the Florida Panthers, Uvis Balinskis,
your favorite player in the league,
all-time name team. Another one that will be interesting to see, if he plays a huge role. I guess we'll have to see. Another all-time name, Mackie Samoskevich, on the roster.
Michigan man. Also the Latvian. Did you see over the weekend? So they played Vancouver, and he got in a fight with Teddy Bluger, one of the only other Latvian players in classic NHL. They fight, and then they get the cameras on them after the game, and they're hugging it out.
Shake hands. Thanks for that. Thanks for that right hook to the jaw. Oh, how's your jaw feel? It hurts, but thank you.
In the league.
We can't forget Minnesota Wild playoff legend and Stanley Cup champion Dmitry Kulikov on the roster for the
defense against the Blues. But
indeed,
he got his ring.
So those 2 games are going to be real tricky, but again, based on what we have seen so far, and this could be exactly what happened a couple of years ago, where the Wild started off okay and then just completely tanked on the road. But what we've seen so far is this Wild team they're pretty resilient.
Yeah, the goaltending hung in there. So
yeah,
the competition obviously is going to get a lot harder now. So we'll see if they rise to the occasion.
The Philadelphia Flyers have scored 12 goals in the 5 games so far. So if you can stop the likes of Cam York, Travis Konechny, Scott Laughton, and Matvei Michkov, the phenom prospect.
Michkov looks unbelievable.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
The fact that he fell. Oh man.
That's an all-timer for Philly, but Ivan Fedotov, not a great start for him. Flyers goalies collectively have an .866 save percentage.
Court's just not happy about that.
I would be
just outscore teams.
Yeah, I would be irate. But the key here in all of these games is going to be something that we have seen so far. And again, I hope I didn't jinx it. The fact that the Wild have not been even they're like 60 penalty minutes clear of Utah, who is the top team in the entire league in terms of penalty minutes. And so if that continues, that's a real good way to pick up wins on the road, is to not send the home team on the power play.
Well, how about Utah? They're doing that and winning games still.
Yeah.
So this is just, which is weird, but yeah, no, 100%, especially when you're going to be up against some amazing power plays,
Lethal.
Tampa and Florida. I mean, the best of the best. That's how they win.
Yeah, like looking at the power play percentage. So the Wild tied for 4th. So far this season, where are they? The Tampa Bay Lightning are somehow at 12.5% on the power play, but that's not
going to go way up.
That's going to go way up
with the talent they have.
Florida Panthers are at 19%, but more importantly, the penalty kills for both the Panthers 89.5 and the Lightning 73.3. Philly's got a good power play, 22.7, and a good kill. So just beat them at 5-on-5 like you should. But moral of the story, tough road test, but I feel like this Wild team is up to it. You've got some good chemistry starting with Kaprizov, Zuccarello, and Rossi. That's a line that can carry you. Boldy, Eriksson Ek, and Johansson they've had their moments, but it seems like they've kind of started to. Although I think with Ek back in, I think that line was fine against Columbus. But
the room seems, it seems like this team really believes in each other, and you got guys like Jakub Lacko, just being an all-time vibes guy.
Unbelievable.
Showing up to Halloween in on-brand Lord of the Rings character, just incredible. Yeah, it's so the vibes are good with the team right now.
Vibes are good. I think the Barracuda just scored again.
We laughed at the AHL, the website. It seems like it was made in the 1800s, and just trying to find stats. It's like what is going on with the league?
Hey, I don't know, but we'll see what happens. We'll keep an eye on all of it because it's Locked On Wild. That's what we do.
Yes.
We've got you locked in on everything Minnesota Wild. So we'll keep you up to date this week. Working on, now that the PWHL has released their schedule, nothing like waiting till like just over a month before the seseason starts.
Hey, there's team names. Yeah.
So we got you.
It's a slow process.
We got you covered for that too. Working on getting an episode fired up with Alexis here to break all that down. But in the meantime, we got you covered Minnesota Wild wise every possible way. So make sure to tune in, make sure to subscribe, and make sure to hit that like button before you head out here for the day. Locked On Wild has you covered with new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.